Good morning, everyone. Today is day 18. We have 10 more chapters left in Acts. So if you have any ideas of what you want to go through next, let me know. But this is what it says in Acts chapter 18. Then Paul left Athens and went to Corinth. There he became acquainted with a Jew named Aquila, born in Pontus, who had recently arrived from Italy with his wife Priscilla. They had left Italy when Claudius Caesar deported all Jews from Rome. Paul lived and worked with them, for they were tent makers, just as he was. Each Sabbath found Paul at the synagogue, trying to convince the Jews and Greeks alike. And after Silas and Timothy came down from Macedonia, Paul spent all his time preaching the word. He testified to the Jews that Jesus was the Messiah. But when they opposed and insulted him, Paul shook the dust from his clothes and said, "Your blood is upon your own heads. I am innocent. From now on I will go preach to the Gentiles." Then he left and went to the home of Titus Justus, a Gentile who worshipped God and lived next door to the synagogue. Crispus, the leader of the synagogue, and everyone in his household believed in the Lord. Many others in Corinth also heard Paul became believers and were baptized. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision and told him, "Don't be afraid to speak out. Don't be silent, for I am with you, and no one will attack and harm you, for many people in the city belong to me." So Paul stayed there for the next year and a half, teaching the word of God. But when Gallio became governor of Achaia, some Jews rose up together against Paul and brought him before the governor for judgment. They accused Paul of persuading people to worship God in ways that are contrary to our laws. But just as Paul started to make his defense, Gallio turned to Paul's accusers and said, "Listen, you Jews. If this were a case involving some wrongdoing or a serious crime, I would have a reason to accept your case. But since it is merely a question of words and names and your Jewish law, take care of it yourself. I refuse to judge such matters." And he threw them out of the courtroom. The crowd then grabbed Sosthenes, the leader of the synagogue, and beat him right there in the courtroom. But Gallio paid no attention. Paul stayed in Corinth for some time after that. Then he said goodbye to the brothers and sisters and went to nearby Cenchrea. There he shaved his head according to Jewish custom, marking the end of a vow. Then he set sail for Syria, taking Priscilla and Aquila with him. They stopped first at the port of Ephesus, where Paul left the others behind. While he was there, he went to the synagogue to reason with the Jews. They asked him to stay longer, but he declined. As he left, however, he said, "I will come back later, God willing." Then he set sail from Ephesus. The next stop was at the port of Caesarea. From there he went up and visited the church at Jerusalem, and then went back to Antioch. After spending some time in Antioch, Paul went back through Galatia and Phrygia, visiting and strengthening all the believers. Meanwhile, a Jew named Apollos, an eloquent speaker who knew the scriptures well, had arrived in Ephesus from Alexandria in Egypt. He had been taught the way of the Lord, and he taught others about Jesus with an enthusiastic spirit and with accuracy. However, he only knew about John's baptism. When Priscilla and Aquila heard him preaching boldly in the synagogue, they took him aside and explained the way of God even more accurately. Apollos had been thinking about going to Achaia, and the brothers and sisters in Ephesus encouraged him to go. They wrote to the believers in Achaia, asking them to welcome him. When he arrived there, he proved to be of great benefit to those by God's grace had believed. He refuted the Jews with powerful arguments in public debate, using the scriptures. He explained to them that Jesus was the Messiah. Yet another great passage. The key verse that I want to focus on today is Acts 18:9. One night, the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Don't be afraid. Keep speaking Do not be silent. Again, that's Acts 18:9. It says, one night the Lord spoke to Paul in a vision. Do not be afraid. Keep on speaking. Do not be silent. The question that we have, and the question I want to leave with you today is, do you really want to know God's will? Do you really want to know what he wants for you? Paul set sail from this place and that place, and he says if it's God's will, he will come back. He said that in Acts chapter 18, verse 21. He wanted to come back. He left Corinth, and he set sail for Ephesus, and he wanted to come back to Corinth. And Paul willingly sailed towards more persecution. He went to Jerusalem knowing that he'll be arrested and to death. Why? Because it's God's will. And there's nothing better for him than to be obedient to it. The question is, how often do we really want to know what God's will is? A lot of times we make decisions and we just ask God to bless them. We want to have comfort in our life. We really don't want to know what he has for us. But the question is, are we ready to obey God no matter the cost, no matter what happens? And I think that's very difficult for a lot of us because we hang on to dear life as though it was something that we made of our own. But really, God is the one who gave us our life. And if we really want to live up to the potential that our life had, then we have to follow him. But then the question comes down is, do we really want to know what his will is for our lives? And to be honest with you, as a pastor, I should be at the center of God's will, asking God every single day, I want to do what you want me to do. But I have to admit, it is scary to ask God, because of all the things I may lose. Am I agreeing to lose it? Yeah, I'll admit at the very end, if I had to wrestle with God with, all the things that are going on in my life and, spend time in prayer, I will succeed, and I will say, yes, Lord, I will follow you wherever you call me to go. But at the same time, I follow him not ignoring the fact that these are the things I'm leaving behind. It's an educated, yes, I will follow you. And that's the kind of following that we have. We see what the cost is, but we are willing to let it go because God knows best. And that's what he designed us to be. I've met a lot of people at the end of their lives, or even close to the end of their lives, or halfway through, more than halfway through their lives, and they say to me, Peter, I wish and then you could fill in the blank with whatever it is that they believe that God has called them to be and do. And they never did it. When things go wrong, that they go back to that moment and say, yeah, God did call me to, and then you could fill in the blank for whatever it is. And the people who don't do God's will, or the people who knowingly don't do what God has called them to do, a lot of them end up living lives that are not very fulfilled. Some of them try to put other people down so that they could feel a little sense of, I have some value and confidence. I've seen it. Some people try to control people who do know what God's will is for their lives and make things harder. Some people are just haters, like we see here too. Paul, again, he wasn't a person who bashed people in with his belief. He conversed with them. He dialogued with people, and yet still they hated him. And so, my friends, do you really want to know what God's will is for your life? It's great. We watch movies and we see stories like this in the Bible, and we're like, yay, good for you, good for you. And for the movies, it makes us feel better about ourselves because our life is not as bad as theirs. But then if it's not as bad, or if we're not willing to go through the paces, it will never turn out to be as good or better. And sometimes we live vicariously through other people in movies, stories, that we don't care to live it in ourselves. See, someone asked me the other day, is it dangerous watching movies? And I would say, not entirely, but I guess one of the main dangers I see here, besides just, taking away more time for us to do what God has called us to do, one of the things that movies do for us and TV shows is it shows that, it allows us to live vicariously through other characters. And in turn, we don't bother to really live out our lives. Video games, for example, heroes of the story, winning, fighting for a cause. And yet when it comes to our own life, we do nothing. I know people who are my age who are still sitting on the couch playing video games and not taking any responsibility in the world. If I just offended you, so be it. Get off your butt. Do something. But if we really get to the center of God's will and ask, Lord, what is it that you really want me to do? I'll give you this. It'll be a whirlwind roller coaster ride that is totally exhilarating and worth it to the very end. I look at my parents' life. They served God when I was young. They traveled around the world. We were able to visit places. I was able to learn different things. You know, at the end of my dad's life, he's still alive though, but he pretty much said, you know what, I've experienced it all. I'm ready to be with God whenever. The only thing that's keeping me back is family, grandchildren. And of course, I really do wish my parents lived for a long, long time to be able to lean against a wisdom that has gone ahead years more than myself. But I want my life to be like theirs. People who followed Christ halfway around the world, letting go of anything that they knew, money, jobs, security, home, cars, everything, to trust in Him. And when we see God come through, it's amazing. Question: do you really want to know what God's will is for your life? Or maybe you're just kind of there. I'll believe Jesus. I'll go out in the boat a little bit, get my feet wet, but I'll never go far beyond where I can't see land and trust in God, because that's all I have left. My friends, I challenge you to trust in Him. What is it that God has called you to do? Once you hear from Him, do it. Have a great day, everyone. Keep praying, keep thinking.